Well, I think let's go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everybody to the AAST East and SEC PDS Combined Professional Development Webinar Series. And our session today is an inside view of academic promotions process and the path to professorship. And so I would like to thank everybody for joining us today. And so I will briefly introduce all of our panelists. But to start, our moderators, we have Mike Ditillo, who is here with us. He's an associate professor at the University of Arizona. I have Bill Chiu, who is a professor of surgery at the University of Maryland and also our president of the SEC PDS. And then as our panelists, I have Jeremy Ward, and he is currently an assistant, hopefully soon to be associate professor of surgery. He's the program director for his surgical critical care program at Baylor. And then I have Todd Costantini. He is a professor of surgery at the University of California, San Diego. And then Bellal Joseph, who is a professor of surgery at the University of Arizona. And so I want to thank everybody for joining us today. And we are going to, for our agenda, we are going to have really a roundtable discussion is the goal of today. So our panelists are going to talk to everybody about a little bit about their academic journey, and then we have 5 kind of specific questions or topics for them to help highlight for everybody. We'll give some closing comments and then open up the floor to questions from the audience. So I'm going to start with Dr. Costantini. So tell us a little bit about your academic journey. What has your path been? How did you choose it, and any challenges that maybe you've had?
Sure. Thank you very much, Dr. Godat. Appreciate the moderators for the invitation today. So, well, my path, have successfully completed the 2nd month of being a professor. So I just got promoted this past July. So at least the process is fresh in my mind. So my academic path, I came in as an assistant professor, obviously, and I'm in at least in our center called, or in our university, the in-residence track, which is a little bit more of a academically rigorous track and has a little bit of different requirements for what you need to do, at least to succeed with promotion. And so when I came in, I didn't know a lot about the process. I knew the general steps, obviously, from assistant to associate to professor. And I sort of figured, I would do the proverbial work hard and write some papers, and everything was going to end up being just fine. But, I've learned so much in the process, and I'm part of why I'm glad to participate in this, because there really is a lot to know. A lot of it's, I think, institution specific to some degree, but the amount of strategy, I think, that's involved to get through this, I think, is important. So my path, I ultimately, I think as an assistant professor was fairly productive. Published some papers, had some society funding, but ultimately, when I applied for associate professorship the first time, I actually didn't get it, and that was sort of a shock to the system a little bit. And I think I had done just as enough. I think I'd done as much as maybe some other people of my time, but maybe my strategy wasn't as clear, and I didn't really understand the game that I needed to play. And so I think that's sort of the big take home from my standpoint, is to really meet with people at your university. Most places have a vice chair of academic affairs or something within your department of surgery that is helping guide the promotion process and reviewing charts, and really find out from the inside what the pitfalls are, what you're looking for, and what you specifically need to do. And I'll be happy to kind of talk about some of my personal pitfalls and things that I know to do now, I think, as we go on in this. But that's my general path. I've gotten as far as I want to be, but it wasn't without some bumps in the road.
Great. Dr. Ward.
Yes, so I think going through this process now, it's imperative to really look at your institution's requirements for promotion in detail. For us, we have 3 pillars that the institution promotes: the education, research, and clinical. And you have to have excellence in 2 of the 3. And it's really more than, my pillar is education and clinical, but it's more than just showing up and teaching. You have to really understand what you need to demonstrate to meet that that standard. And there are various assessments you can do. You know, we have a form, and you fill it out, and you can get that self-assessment and kind of do it even before you're to the point where you're wondering whether I'm ready for promotion, just to see where you're at and which boxes are lacking. Because even if, you know, I'm focused on 2 pillars, I still have to have something in the third column. The third column can't be completely blank. So I think that's the really important part, to understand what it is and what you need to meet those metrics.
And Dr. Joseph.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dr. Godat, for having this. You know, I'm kind of along with Dr. Costantini's route here. It was kind of like a stumbled path that I learned a lot. You know, initially when I joined, I came from a community program. We really didn't have ranks. I didn't know what tenure or non-tenure meant. And really, promotion from assistant to associate meant a pay raise when I started. And that was the only way you were getting a pay raise. And so, like, as you started doing it, or as I started doing it, I realized that, you know, it comes with some responsibilities. And I wish I could have gone back and told myself from day one that I start, you know, what I should have been doing to record all the things that you do. And sometimes what we do, we take for granted, like it's just part of our job, not realizing that that's really what separates us and allows us to be as competitive. Because especially in the tenure track, so I'm a tenured professor, you know, you're competing against PhDs and funded researchers, and each time I kind of moved forward, it was a lesson learned, and a lesson that a long list of I wish I would have to get where I was. And, you know, and then the other thing that happened, honestly, was I was often told, you're too young, or you need to wait your turn. And what I learned is when I went back to, because as both speakers have mentioned already, every university has a core set of expectations. And you need to understand what that means, not only from within the university, but from your division chief, your chairman, so you can understand what languages and what metrics you need to meet to move. And we can talk about the different tracks later on, but that's kind of how I success through failures, I would call it, to get to where I am today.
Fantastic. Thank you to each of you. So that is a great lead-in for our next topics, because the next thing that we'll talk about are the different types of academic paths, and then a little bit more about what's right for you, a little bit about what is in the process, kind of the nuts and bolts of it, what do you need to keep track of, and then a little bit about letters for promotion, which is also in that overall process that we're going to hopefully introduce people to just a little bit here. So Dr. Joseph, you gave a nice lead in for yourself. So tell us a little bit about the different academic paths.
Yeah, you know, I think in my tenure of 12 years, you know, we've actually grown in this arena, because systems have tried to incorporate different pathways, realizing that it's not all just, I got a grant from the NIH, I became a professor or an associate professor based on those things. I think regardless, one other thing I just want to talk from a high level before I go into detail is all paths cross each other. Like, there is no one path, I'm in this silo and I don't need to worry about the other metrics. And I think that's very important, because regardless of your clinical, research, education, leadership, or tenure, you will have to show some development and growth from clinical instructor to assistant to associate to professor amongst multiple cores. I think what the different academic paths really are where is your focus? Where is your 75% of your, you know, growth and development? And I think, you know, we all are fortunate enough that we all start as clinicians, and, you know, and how you show growth and development and leadership and international or national recognition in these arenas really isn't that hard if you stay focused on the things that you do. And often when I speak with my faculty from day one, I'm like, whatever you do, as simple as it seems, every thank you, every great job, every thank you for helping me, create a P&T folder. On this date, I gave this lecture. On this date, I gave this, you know, outreach program. And so for the academic paths, clinical, you're highly focused on, again, programs, program development, doing the clinical work, meeting your RVUs, different university activities. For research, this is where you're going to have to be a little bit more into the pathway of funded grants, NIH, DOD, PCORI, whatever those may be. But this is the traditional area where you could be just a PhD and go down this line. Education is you're building programs for outreach or within the institution for education. This could be student, resident education, nursing, respiratory therapy, whatever area you are out there doing, I think the education session. But I will tell you that, again, each track has, or each path has crossover with some of the other ones. The tenure is probably the most difficult because you're on a timeline. That's one of the few tracks where you actually have to meet certain metrics. And if you don't get promoted on the tenure track, you actually have some institutions you have to leave or come off of the track completely. So it's really important you understand what that means at your institution when you have that thing. And then finally, the leadership track is harder earlier on in your career because you just don't know those opportunities will open up for you. And then the final thing I will say is you can actually go between tracks. Like if you start off on a clinical or education track and then you become funded researcher and you're going down this line, then it's okay to go back and say, I'm going to go for tenure now. It is, you'll hear a lot of opinions, oh, tenure doesn't matter. None of it matters. What matters is what you are putting yourself and putting expectation for yourself. So that's my thoughts on the academic paths. The levels and timing, again, there's this traditional first 5 years as an assistant, and then the next 5 years as an associate, and then maybe you can go up for professorship. I did my, I'm not doing this, but I'm kind of news. I was a professor within 6 years, but it was a big push against that. There was people that didn't want to see me do that, and they couldn't say anything because I think if you understand what your institution wants as an expectation, and every university, you can go on your website through the provost's office and see your different tracks, what the expectations are, and draw out your grid and set your expectations. And then you set the time that's good for you for your journey, not necessarily saying it could be 3 years, it could be 7 years, it doesn't matter. Just set it up. And then having someone who checks on you and goes through those metrics, and you put timelines on the metrics, helps you stay on path. So that's what I would say about the different types of academic paths and the levels and the timings.
Fantastic. Thank you for all of that. So we're going to go ahead and move to the next. Did anybody have any quick words about that?
I just want to amplify, I think, Bellal's point about, your academic path is where you're focused in your notoriety is, but you still have to do the other areas. When you think about your self-assessment, you have to, I'm in more of a research track, but I have to be making progress and achieving things in these other areas, or else it's not gonna go very well.
I would also say that if it's your focus, say for me is education, that it's not just teaching courses and lecturing the medical students, but it's also demonstrating the quality, which is either qualitative or quantitative, whether it's emails from the course directors or the clerkship directors saying that was great, can you do it again? Or it's quantitative and it's evaluations. So if they're not providing evaluations, you take evaluations with you and you get them filled out and they go in your portfolio. And then there's different categories for the leaders for education too. There's teaching, and then there's leadership, and then there's innovation and things as well. So you need to look at it broadly, and it's not just I'm going to teach a lot. There's a lot more to it.
Look, Laura, can I just add one other thing?
Sure.
I think that's really important is there's your institutions will have a departmental level promotion and tenure committee, and then you'll have the institutional promotion and tenure, and they're not always aligned. And so make sure you first understand what your department expectations are. We spent the last year realigning our Department of Surgery with the College of Medicine. But ultimately, the College of Medicine is who's going to promote you, or your college. And so make sure that regardless of your track, that when you find the college's expectations, you go back to your department leadership and say, what are your expectations? Are they aligned with this? Or is there anything else you want to see from me as I go forward? So
perfect. All right. We're going to move to the next topic, and we'll cover some more of these basics. I think this next slide is for Dr. Costantini, and you guys talked a little bit about this already, which is kind of selecting what is right for you and how you do that. And I think you guys said it really well, but is, what is your 75% effort? And so if you want to expand on that a little bit for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of, they use words like you have to have national or international notoriety in something. And so, you have, no matter what you're doing, whether it's basic research outcomes, whatever, you have to have a focus that you're trying to develop your sort of reputation to be known for, at least something that you can sell that way during your self-assessment. So it's important to try to have some focus to whatever your program is, so that you're able to convey to the committee that you are sort of advancing your program within that. And the metrics can be obviously a little different depending on what you're doing, but you need to kind of show not only that you have a research program, for instance, but that it's independent. You're not doing the same thing that your mentor or that your senior partner had been doing and sort of just adding on to their program. You need to show some independence within that. And I think, so it's really important that you give some thought to where are you spending your time, because we all get interested in different things. I think the analogy someone told me once is don't be a spork. You have to be a fork or a spoon. Don't be a spork. Is that you have to find a focus area and kind of have enough discipline to advance in that area while still doing the other things that interest you, say within research or whatever your education or leadership program is.
Dr. Ward or Dr. Joseph have any additional thoughts on that?
I really like his thoughts on, this is your story. This is your journey. This is not you making a copy of someone else. And I think that is when you read that, having served on multiple committees for P&T, I think when you read the journey and you understand, because that's what you're going to have to write down some days, your story, and you can show how you went above and beyond or took a different route. It really emphasizes and helps show why they value you to promote to the next level. So I agree with Todd on that point.
Awesome. All right. Dr. Ward, so tell us what goes into that whole process. What is it when, you get your email from the academic office and they say, it's time to put your packet together. I don't know, mine comes in a big program that I have to upload everything into. So tell us a little bit about that process. They're all universally somewhat similar and really about that self-assessment. I think that we've all been referring to just a little bit.
I think it's important to understand what format they want everything in from the very beginning, because if you don't have the details of what that format is. So for us, I had to detail not just every lecture, but how many learners were there, what category learners they were, how many hours the contact was, how much time was spent putting it together. So I gave a conference to 30 medical students for 1 hour and spent 3 hours preparing it. And I did it 4 times a year. And so it was a lot more. Once I started putting it together, I was like, wow, this is a lot more detailed than I anticipated. But luckily, I had put a lot of that together for an institutional award already in the college. So that really helped prepare me. So I would say if there are awards that you can apply for that can help support that, those are very good, because it starts getting you in the mindset of how to put stuff together in the format that's needed. The self-assessment form for us was pretty straightforward, and it was something in our department, and it was like Dr. Joseph was saying, you go to your department's promotion committee first. And if you haven't met those boxes on the self-assessment, then you're not going to move on to the next step. And fortunately for us, our department's promotion committee is very much aligned with the college's committee. So I know in some places that may not be the case, but for us, it's fortunate because you just prepare one thing and it goes to you do your assessment. Yes, I check all the boxes and then put your portfolio together. So for my education portfolio, there were like 5 different categories. So teaching, and then educational leadership, and then there was innovation. So like courses that I had created that were new for the residents or the medical students or for the fellows, curriculum development. So it's a good idea to get that ahead of time and look, what are the categories that I need to fill in, and try to plot that out, because it's going to happen over a long period of time, right? This is all like a 4 or 5 year plan to get this thing filled out. So what things can I do that will lead to the next step? So
Great.
Yeah, I think,
Go ahead.
I think the self-assessment is an art form. I really think, I totally underestimated the importance of this document. And just to be clear for folks that are newer to this or younger, this is sort of a narrative text that lays out who you are and what your goals are. And then here's, like Bellal said, here's my story related to research. Here's my story related to clinical activity. Here's my story related to teaching. But you really have to sell yourself in a really cogent manner to sort of say where I started, all the things I did, and where I ended up. And I think we all tend to be pretty humble individuals, and there is no time for that in the self-assessment. Like you have to write it like you are, the greatest thing that's ever occurred to academic surgery, because I think that's what's needed. The last real quick comment I made, the thing that really made all the difference for me is somebody from our department tenure committee who sees all these self-assessments, good and bad, sees what works with the university, basically said, yours is okay, but it's not great. And here's a format that you should try to use, and totally transformed it and really sold myself much better, and made all the difference in the world.
Can I just add 2 quick points? One,
Please.
Lose the imposter syndrome, because you have to, like, I can't emphasize that enough. That's the biggest thing when you read these packets. And number 2 is know your audience. So to Todd's point, know, who are reading your packets. These are PhDs who don't know anything about clinical science at all. Sometimes they don't even know what the inside of a hospital looks like. And you're trying to show your development. So what you take for granted is easily missed with these. So lose the imposter syndrome and know your audience. I think those are 2 big important points.
It's like you go through up till this point, you almost just keep showing up, doing a good job, and people recognize it and move you along to the next step. But now it's not that. You still have to do that, but now you have to put it all down on paper. And there are so many things that you don't even think about that you're doing that can go into that. It's like you have to brag about yourself a little bit, and what you're documenting. Things that you think are mundane are actually not that mundane. They count.
Which is an excellent segue, yet again, into things you need to keep track of, right? These are all the things you didn't realize were important as you go through. And you end up, I know oftentimes I've ended up going back through my calendar just to look and see it, the things that I didn't keep track of. So what are those things? What are some tips or tricks that anybody has about the things you need to keep track of to help you to ensure that promotions? And this is for Dr. Costantini.
It's organization. I'm pretty organized, but I'm intermittently bad about remembering all the details for the student talks and the talks to the trauma nurses and all the different outreach things that you're doing. But, there needs to be an accounting for everything that you did. And so, as Bellal mentioned, having your P&T file, whatever that is, to help you make sure that you collect all those activities, because it's amazing over the course of a couple-year period, all the things that you'll forget about, or and you really want to get credit for everything that you do. The teaching, reviews are obviously usually handled through whatever system that your university is using. But I think the point was made earlier by Dr. Godat. These can really submarine a good file. You can be, doing all the right things, but if you've, got bad reviews, you have to really bring it every day and make sure that you're interacting well and maintaining your composure and things like that in front of whoever's watching you, because that can be a real issue. But I think in this area of things, we're all doing all sorts of things. It's just having the discipline and organization to keep track of it.
Yeah, and what I try to encourage is like whether it be an email or a file, at the end of each year from year one, you should start thinking about what you did and organize each year by year. So when you go up for your promotion, you can go back and then use that as a format to help develop your path over time, because that's the other thing. You want it to sound so, I really think email folders are really nice, and just anything you do, just send yourself an email and slide it over. I think that's important. And one other thing we haven't really talked about is also, like, get yourself involved in publishing. I mean, I know it's so powerful. We didn't mention it at all, and no matter it's what track you're on, it's not hard to be involved in projects through MITs, through your trauma systems, through your friends, through your partners, through your colleagues. That's another area, I think. Start that early, because over time it adds up. How am I going to ever get 10 publications or 20 publications? It's really just reach your hand out and ask, and you will find a way that happens. So that's the other thing I think I just wanted to bring into the conversation.
Yeah. And just to add to that, I think your point's important, because you don't want to have any big holes in your file in any of those areas. Even if you're not doing research, isn't your 75% thing, but you don't want to have anything where it's basically you've got nothing in that category, and because things are laid out by categories, and so you want to just make sure that you're kind of hitting all those areas.
Fantastic. All right. I'm going to move to the next thing, which is getting those letters for promotion. So how does that happen? What is that all about? This was a complete mystery to me when I first went up for my first packet, and somebody asked me, who do I want to write down? So how do you figure this out, and what's it all about, Dr. Joseph?
Yeah, number one, you're not alone. I think that's number one. Like, don't think you're alone. Number two, there's just a background contract understanding that, like, we all write letters, and we all write letters for each other. And I think, that first line there says, talk to your division chief or chairman. You're not going to get through this process alone. And if you are, and because sometimes they may not agree with you, and that's okay. You just need to then reach out to a mentor, to a sponsor, to a coach, to a program director, and get their perspective. But you can, if you have friends and colleagues that are, promoted, that you have not, it's important to understand the rules. So some institutions, you could not have worked with people, you could not have published with people, you could not. And so you got to know every one of the rules when you ask. And you usually start a list of 10 or 15 people, and you're, and then it gets down to about 4. And then everyone's like, what do we do now? But you also want people that aren't involved in trauma, like, or in our societies. And it could be a chairman's colleague who looks at your promotion. So there's this, I don't know, I know this is being recorded, but there's this like underground understanding that, you write for me, I write for you, but it's always, and you're not, and you always want people that are going to support your application. And that's another thing I think is important, that the list is created of sponsors who've recognized you and your work, who've seen you. If a senior person has walked up to you and says, if there's anything I can ever do for you, take them up on it at this point. And so that's what I would say to this. And then finally, the last thing is, we have a session on like marketing yourself on social media, at conferences, be on committees. This is how you get yourself out there. And I think that's another way, because people sometimes want to know who you are, be able to say, I was at a conference and I saw their work, their podium, their whatever it may be. And that helps a lot. So
Fantastic. Anybody else? Any other thoughts on this process?
Well, this process early on gave me a ton of stress. I didn't know who to ask. I got recommendations for great people to give me letters, and I was like, I'm never going to ask those. I don't want those people being asked to write a letter for me, because they, but it's true. It's part of the process. And I think the big thing is, a lot of the best part of what we do is the relationships we make and the people we meet. And so get involved and just get to know people, be visible, and people are more than happy to support you, even if you're not on a sort of a constant communication basis with those people. They want to support your career, but get yourself out there and be known.
And can I just add one more piece? This year is probably the first year where I've gotten a lot of requests where I don't, obviously if it's someone in trauma or in our arena, I'll get a request from a chairman who I've never met or talked to. But I think for the people listening and the young people, people want to help and people want to see you succeed, and don't ever think otherwise. And I think don't be afraid to put a name of someone you think is just not touchable. We're all on both sides of that equation. And I think just know that you're going to be sitting on the side of writing letters someday, and remember that. And I think when you go through the process and you understand, for those of us who have been through it, we continuously give back. And I think it's important to remember that as you build your list and ask people.
That's a great point.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. I couldn't agree more. Like Dr. Costantini said, this scared me the first time, and then now you get it's like an honor to get asked almost, because you get to help promote somebody. So I think that's a really great point. Thank you for that.
It still scares me a little though.
That's okay. All right. So the wish I would have known sooner. So this is kind of the catch-all. What things do you guys wish you would have known sooner? So some of the things that we came up with previously were, just like we were talking about earlier, put everything into a folder, keep track of things, emailing yourself everything that you did. I think that's a great idea. But really keeping track of absolutely everything. Reading your promotions packet to remind yourself about what you need and what you need to make sure you accomplish for each step, how many publications, what qualifies as a publication, those sorts of things, finding yourself a mentor to help you stay on track with those things. And then the other thing that I can't emphasize enough to everybody that, we all felt putting this talk together was sell yourself in that personal statement. This is your 5-minute elevator talk. Like, this is no time to be bashful. This is no time to feel like an imposter. You have to really tell people what you've been doing, what you're up to, and why you are truly unique and special, and what you've done to, and it's not faking it. It's what you've done to contribute to the care of patients and injured patients and acutely ill patients and everything that we do every single day. So what else do you guys wish you had known? What would you put into that, into this slide?
I had a very academic boss who was about publishing. And so, when I went and wrote my first P&T, kind of like Todd mentioned, and it was like, yeah, what are you, like, where's all the other parts? So I would encourage, I wish I would have read what it meant to promote to wherever where I was supposed to go, assistant, associate, or professor. There's a ton of examples. Read one prior to your next 3 to 5 year journey. And then, like I think Dr. Ward said it, like, rounding every day, and then you did a DBT project or a QI project that, changed. And then all of a sudden, you're just like, oh yeah, that's what I do every Tuesday at M&M. We talk about this, and then we do but those little things, I wish I would have read what it really meant to be promoted beyond just publications and stuff, and during my first promotion. And so that's what I would say. And then the second thing is just the organization. I know we've all said, oh, it's easy, just create an email folder and just keep track. It is probably like, it takes about 30 seconds, but every breath you make for that entire year, teaching, feedback, lecture, travel, whatever it is, you need to document that. I think I can't emphasize that enough. So
fantastic. Dr. Ward, what would you put on this slide?
I would say, again, like Dr. Joseph said, how to keep track of everything, just figuring out a way to organize. So I have, it's only in the last year that I've figured out that I can have different calendars in my Outlook calendar. So I can recategorize an appointment into a specific calendar. So I can pull up a calendar of all my lectures, and it filters out everything else. So when I need to review and say, what lectures did I give? I have that calendar. How important it is to keep track of the quality of the educational activities you do, or the quality of the clinical activities, and not just that you did them. It took me probably 3 years to figure that one out when I applied for my first institutional award, and they were like, you taught a bunch, but where's the quality? I think that was it. And then the importance of getting involved in committees and some of the societies, and participating in things, and really getting yourself outside of your own institution.
Fantastic. Dr. Costantini?
For me, it's the devil is in the details. So there is a criteria for each of the paths that you want to be on to ultimately get promoted. I looked at it as this sort of abstract process. that you were just going to kind of, it was going to all be okay. But there are some hard stops, I think, based on what you want to do and what the track are. And, you know, one, for instance, for me is I had written a bunch of papers, but I got sort of negative points because too many of my papers were with my research mentors. So I had not shown independence by being on things without them. And so, you know, I didn't know that before. I just wasn't aware. And so go to your vice chair of academics, talk to the people on your tenure committee, talk to your division chief, because again, they've seen things that work and they've seen things that don't work, and they know what the sort of secret recipe is to make it happen. So find out the details for whatever you're doing so that you can, you know, approach things with that in mind, rather than looking back and wishing you do something different.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, know the rules of the game. Like, you don't want to play a game and not know how to keep score. And so I'll give you an example. Like, you know, we had to have an evaluation from a student back on the faculty, and you don't do that, and then you go up and that's the only thing missing from your packet, and you hit every single metric, and you need to have 3 of those before the due date. Now you're scrambling, you're running, you're trying to set up lectures. And so know the rules of the game and set them down and write them out. And then when you categorize into each rule. And so you know what that is. And I mean, enjoy it, right? Like, enjoy what you need to do to be promoted, be proud of it, but at the same point, understand it. I think that's a big important part of it. So.
Dr. Ditillo, anything else that I missed on this one?
Yeah, I think one of the things we focused a lot on research and that's the path that everybody knows about. But the other 2 pathways, I think, can be a road to success, right? So I'm not on the same road as Bellal. Being on the podium and getting grants has just never been really my thing. But on the education side, I was doing it informally and then making it formal and getting leadership positions within the education track. I think there are 2 ways to do this. There are educators who do a ton of research, right? And that is not directly clinical care, but, you know, studies on teaching medical students and residents. And then there's the leadership track within education. And that's the one that I'm on. What programs have you built? What jobs have you had and improved them? And all these things that you do every day as a PD or an APD, these are quality projects within the educational system. You may think it's just part of the job, and it is. But that's how you rebrand it, and that's how you sell it to the committee. And I think that's true in each of the 3 different arms. And it's okay that you don't follow a traditional path. I certainly didn't, but you could still get to where you want to be. It's just, you got to find what you like and then stick to that, because if you're a square peg in a round hole, it's just not going to work. And I did that for a while, and it becomes exhausting because you don't enjoy it. It becomes a second job, and that's not the way it should be.
I think we're in the best place we've ever been, right? 10 years ago, you were either on tenure or you weren't. You know, education track and research track and clinical track didn't really exist. And I think and I think it's beautiful that we are. And to Dr. Ditillo's point, but if you look at all of them and you put all 4 tracks and you put, you know, assistant, associate professor of each track, I think that's why you can jump. I mean, it goes down to some key elements, you know, national reputation, excellence in whether it be research, education, teaching, development of program, development of education. So I think they're all very similar. It's just how you end that sentence. Is it clinical? Is it education? Is it research? And again, the 75-25% rule, I think it's critical to understand, because you're not going to get in just being a super researcher or a super clinician or a super educator. So I agree, Mike. That's a great point.
And Dr. Chiu, I'll let you round us out there. Anything you wish you had known sooner?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Godat. I do wish I had known a lot sooner, but let me ask this question of the panelists. Number 1, how early should someone start keeping track of their data about what they've done? Should they start from day 1 or only when they're getting ready to apply for a promotion? And number 2, we all know what to put in our CV, but what are some of the things you would not think of recording or keeping track of that is important for your clinical or your teaching portfolio?
All right, Dr. Ward, you're up first.
I would say you want to start keeping track of this from day one. And that's the hard part, because it's hard to know what to keep track of. And that goes back to the importance of looking at what the criteria are and what you need to record. You know, early on, you know, started in, you know, got on a committee, and, you know, we tackled CLABSI or something like that. And never really dawned on me that that was something that would be an example of, you know, clinical excellence, because we did something and it had some effect, and, you know, the quality people measure it all. And that is stuff that matters. And it seems like routine stuff, but that's stuff that goes on the list as well.
Yeah, I think the other thing important to remember to capture is who you're mentoring, because as you move along, you start mentoring more people of all levels. It might be undergrads, it might be postdocs in the lab, residents, research residents, international residents, whatever that is. But make sure you keep track of them, and then also keep track of their successes that they have when they're with you, because those are important too. If you're have a research resident you're mentoring and the project you did together led to them, you know, having a presentation or some award or great success, it's important to capture that as well.
Yeah. I want to say the opposite, the landmines. I wish I would have paid more attention to what could, like, the resident evaluation or the student evaluation. You know, I mean, my student evaluations early on were not very good. I was this tough, like, you know, and you'd see a bunch of them, and to come out of that and prove that that's not what represented me, and there was other evaluations that were not like that, it was really hard to come back from that. Same with education. I mean, if you're not, I really think you got to worry about the landmines. Like Todd, you told us an example of research, how you did a ton of research, but because it was in line with, you just don't know. So I really think understanding the things that could also hinder your promotion and how you balance those when they do happen, and focus on them and make an effort to show that you took the time, because it takes time to change those things. They don't change overnight. You're a year and a half. And it took me 2 years to, you know, focus on changing the way I got evaluations. But I think it's important, but it was a lesson learned. It really was a lesson learned. So watch out for the landmines too.
I think some of those things are also, if you turn them around, are opportunities for you to document how you have incorporated some of that feedback to improve. You know, like Dr. Ward's lecture was not very interactive. Well, they're very interactive now.
Yeah.
Dr. Ward he had some good images, but he could have had more. Well, there's plenty of images now, and that kind of thing, or things that you can do if you're on that education track to show that, you know, you're working to improve as an educator. You know, what courses can you go to for professional development? Can you have
Coaches?
Coaches I videoed my lecture and had it reviewed by expert educators. And so there's a lot of things in there that can be done. Yeah.
Dr. Ditillo?
Yeah, just one other thing that Dr. Joseph touched on is the social media part of all of this, right? There was a time where webinars like this did not count for anything, right? And now we see a huge part of that. And it's not built into everybody's CV. And there's not always, like for our UAV take, there's not a part for that. But I can tell you from a program director, I've done a bunch of stuff on Twitter that I've worked now with mentoring with a lot of people that I wouldn't have contact with, and it has stay. I mean, this is part of your academic work. It's what gives you a national and even an international reputation outside of being with societies and stuff. And I mean, if it's one thing that we learned from COVID, there's a lot you can do without leaving, you know, your home or your office, and it lets you spread your name. There are a ton of people that, you know, we're friendly with on whichever social media platform that you like, and it forms connections that will help you down the line. And I know when I went up for promotion, it was super helpful to reach out with people, some of which I had never met in real life, but I was fairly close to, and they were helpful. And I know that's one of the bits of advice I got from Dr. Joseph when I started over here, and is against it as I was in the beginning. He was 100% right, and I've jumped on board ever since.
Fantastic.
Can I say one more thing that just came to my mind? Sorry.
Sure.
You know, a lot of times you'll be like interviewed by the local news media for like oh, it's awareness, it's fall awareness month, and news stations here to talk to you about prevention, or you're highlighted in an article or something random, right? And that those things also, Mike, it came to my mind when Mike was talking about social media, but those things matter too. Like highlight all, like I have a whole section on that, and anytime you get the opportunity to do those things, but record, how many of us are in the newspaper or it's local news media just for something simple that's local, awareness, burn, heat, stroke, whatever, that's what we deal with a lot in Tucson. But I mean, you know what I mean? And so those are things too you should keep track of, because those are also, people don't realize that, you're recognized as someone who understands this stuff when you put that on your promotion.
Fantastic. Thank you for that follow-up question, Dr. Chiu. That was great insights from everybody. I'm going to do this a little bit in reverse, I think, because I want to make sure we have time to get to the questions from our audience. So the first question I have is there a ratio of letter writers we should aim for in terms of people in our specialty versus not? Anybody want to grab that one?
The most important thing is you have people who your promotion and tenure committee recognize as their as someone who's just who can write your letter. I remember when I had my letters written, and one of the people wrote, in my institution this person would never be promoted, and I'm like, okay, we don't need your letter, like, you know what I mean? Like, so I think it's really just assuring that it's not the ratio or the who, it's rather, is it a professor, is it an associate, is it, and do they have the qualifications and have read through what your institution needs to be put in the letter specifically. And I think that's more important.
Yeah, and I think if I may add, I know there are very specific criteria for those letter writers, as you mentioned earlier. And so you really just have to look at what your individual institution wants regarding people within your specialty, with outside of your specialty, who you have or haven't collaborated with or written or published with, and those sorts of things. And so some of it will be institution specific as well. The next question I have, which I think is an important one, because it's what we all fear, right? So what if the worst case scenario happens and unexpectedly you are not supported at one of the levels of review for advancement? So what is due process? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I think most universities obviously have due process to re-review your file, and that's something you could potentially request, but I'm not sure how well that ultimately is going to change things. I think just because you do not get moved on for promotion when you apply doesn't mean you're, necessarily done. In my case, I wasn't. I just went, we have steps within each thing. I went to the next step as an assistant professor, and I tried again in 2 years. So I think, you just need to get feedback on what didn't work in your promotion file. And then see if that's something that you either want to or can change prior to the next review, and then proceed from there. And if it's not, then you got to reevaluate, what path you're in, and sort of how you want to proceed.
Anybody else?
The other part of that is, if you're not being supported within your home institution, I think it's a wake-up call to say, am I in the right place? And what does this mean for my career over the next 5 to 10 years, right? If your division chief or your chair or someone, your, vice chair who's in charge of promotion is not there, I think that's a really large warning sign that, this may not be the place for you to be. And maybe that's the wake-up call to move on.
Understanding the why, I think that's kind of what they're saying. You got to understand the why. Is it really because you didn't meet the criteria when you go back and look at it and they can justify that to you? Is it that what Dr. Ditillo just mentioned, that maybe they just don't support you, it's not your turn yet? I mean, every institution is different, and I think you have to understand the why and be okay with it, and understand that there's an opportunity to move, to get that chance again to move. And I think it's a hard thing when you don't get this promoted, but you're going against everyone across the entire campus sometimes for some of this stuff, and you just got to understand that. So
Excellent. Well, the next question I think is also an excellent question, which is, how can we help each other be successful in this process? And I think I like this question because I think it's something that we do for each other, and certainly it is a small community of trauma and acute care surgeons out there. And so what all can we do for each other specifically? Dr. Costantini, I'll go for you.
Yeah, well, I think one of the most important things that was said earlier is that we're all here because we want to see you and each other succeed. Like, there's no, we're here to kind of get each other, along in the process and have everybody sort of succeed and prosper. And so I think that means, you shouldn't be afraid to reach out to senior people, either in your own institution or people that nationally, or hey, send an email to somebody that you think might have some information, or reach out to them at a meeting or whatever it is. Just talk to the people that are in our community, because we're all here to help.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I think there are opportunities, right? So for me, one of the real aha moments was at East during one of the mentoring sessions, the no tie, no problem. There were a bunch of different tables, and one was on P&T. I know Bellal was one of the main people there. And we were at different institutions, even though we trained together. And I just hopped onto that table, even though he and I used to talk all the time, but hearing a different perspective, and then hearing everybody at the table who we were all in the same boat, right? And just being able to bounce questions off each other, I found super, super helpful, right? So whether it's an in-person meeting or this bunch of stuff through Med Twitter, where people can answer questions, I think just makes life a lot easier. It's not as hard as it used to be. It's not as formal as it used to be, but those connections are the ones that help. And those are your peer letter writers for you, right? These are the people that you can write letters for. And even in your own institution, like, we're lucky because we work with so many different specialties. So I know you're going to need someone from another department, and it's super easy for us, right? We work tons with anesthesia, we work tons with emergency medicine, orthopedics, interventional radiology. These are the people that when you're in the lounge and you say hello to and you start chatting to, they're the ones who are going to help each other, right? So you should be open to help other people, because it's going to come back, and the positions are going to be reversed in the future.
Dr. Chiu.
Yeah, I have one other question for the panelists then. The one topic we didn't really talk about is outcome. So in your clinical and teaching portfolio, should people keep track of outcomes? For example, everyone you have given advice or mentored, medical students and residents, should you keep track of what happened to them? And if you built a clinical program, or if you brought a particular operation that you do more frequently to your institution, what are the outcomes? So is that important to keep track of?
Dr. Joseph.
I have a question, so I'm gonna leave the hand up for a question, but I'll answer Dr. Chiu's question. Absolutely. I mean, if you build something and it grows over time, like fall prevention fair, I think that's that imposter, like, I took something and I made it greater by X%. That's a powerful statement. And I think that's what the reviewers are really looking for. They you represent the university as an assistant, as an associate or professor. And that's what they want to make it, the value of it lay on. So
It's
So
just,
did you-
it's
Go
more
ahead.
evidence of quality, what your learners do, how they perform, how your QI projects, the measurements from those, it's all evidence of quality. And none of it matters if there's no evidence of quality.
that's right.
And that's the stuff that goes into your personal statement, right? So this is what I did, and this is what became of it. Again, everybody's been talking about talking yourself up. This makes it real easy, right? You started a CLABSI program, you reduced your infections by 20%. That's a huge kudo, right? And that's just something you do because you run an ICU or something, but that has big implications from a system standpoint, from a hospital standpoint. So that's low hanging fruit.
All right, what was your question, Dr. Joseph?
This is for the panelists. One thing we did not talk about is in the era of 2022 is the underrepresented minority, underrepresented advancement of our female colleagues. And I wonder, how do you help the question of diversity, equity, inclusion, and promotion. How are you? What are some things, if you're an underrepresented minority, as I am, like how do you go? What should you do to help yourself to get the opportunity, or to help yourself grow to promotion? Because oftentimes these are some of the reasons where we see the discrepancy. So what are you guys doing to help this, or what are things people should think about to help get going in their own institutions?
Well, that's not an easy question necessarily, Dr. Joseph. Thank you. No, I think well, part of it is I hope that we're all developing diverse teams so that the people that are within your teams are being provided opportunities. I think the same is true though when you have, we all have people reach out to us for research opportunities or other experiences in the hospital, and I think making sure that we provide the shadowing experiences and the volunteer research experiences to a diverse group of people is really important to sort of get them into the pipeline and help build their experiences so they can start building their CV, so to speak, to advance their career.
I think the other thing that makes me think of is, and it's tied into the question we had earlier in the chat, is how can we help each other be successful? Well, that's all about it, right? So how do I help other women? How do I help other minorities or other, well, we have to help promote each other. And I think we have to help give each other opportunities to shine and prove ourselves on committees and national committees and in leadership. And I think all those things that we do for each other, and maybe there's things being done, I truly believe that people are helping to do those things a little bit in the background sometimes. And I think we just need to be cognizant of that and do that with intent within our own institutions, but also within our national and our local and national committees and communities.
And Dr. Joseph, it seems like the perfect opportunity to turn the question back on you. So from your experiences, what should the general we be doing, and from where where you sit, what are the things that we can do to ensure that those things happen?
Yeah, I think I think one is getting everyone to get past the I don't belong, or it's not possible, or it's not me. I think what Dr. Godat was talking about is really making sure that there's equity in all of the opportunities that are promoted through as a leader. Like I literally have an Excel sheet, and it's just making sure that I look and make sure that co-authors or book chapters or committees and encouraging and devising a plan with everyone to make sure that we're doing those things. I mean, the structural resistance against it, and then helping. I think this is a journey, and it's better traveled together. And I think finding the promoters. I mean, some of the questions here that are like, what if you have to get your own letters? What if someone's not promoting you? I mean, I think reaching outside of the institution and finding the other people to get on the team to help build those things, it's taking some effort, but acknowledging that it exists and making a conscious effort and discussing it as part of a hurdle for advancements. I mean, that's one of the things I do. I don't dippy-dally around it. I'm like, look, this is what the data says. We need to get past it. Let's start thinking. Let's make a plan. I think that's another way to think about adding it. So
thank you for that question. Absolutely an important question that we all need to be asking ourselves as well as talking about. So thank you for bringing that up. We are basically at the end of time. I apologize. There were a couple of questions in the chat that we didn't quite get to. One of them quickly being, when should we consider applying for promotion? A lot of these things are kind of hardwired into your system. And so you will get notified when it's time. Usually it's a 2 or 3 year process. And so oftentimes your institution will help guide you on that. So you'll know when it's time, when you're up for your next step versus going from assistant to associate. And then I just got one more question. Sometimes the process is for the applicant to find their own letter writers, and sometimes the committee in the department or the school finds letter writers. Are there advantages or disadvantages for either of these?
I mean, the letter writers need to be obviously experts in the field. I think obviously it's a bit more of a challenge if you have no say over your letter writers. I've never experienced that before. Usually you're providing a list because generally in your field, you know who the experts are, at least at, compared to the university level, who again might be reviewed by non-surgeons. But I don't know, does anyone have an experience where their letter writers were chosen for them?
I don't think I did.
I don't think, I mean, I think if your division or department are, approve your promotion, then the goal is to create the best packet possible, because there's a lot of time, effort, and energy that goes into this. And so I think it's a matter of, the best way forward to help.
Fantastic. Well, we are just over time now. So I'd like to wrap it up. If there's any last closing comments, I really want to thank our panelists as well as my co-moderators for their insights as well as questions. I really appreciate everybody's time today. Any last statements?
Yeah, I wanted to thank all three organizations, the AAST East and SCC PDS, for collaborating to put this together.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I guess a reminder to those of you on the call, we are all a small community and we're all here to help. So please feel free to reach out to any of us at any time. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great session. Appreciate
Thanks.
it.